Okay, so the class is being recorded, and my name is Dr. Sam Abdul Jalil, and this is A230A. So this is obviously the last leg of the course. We're done with the MTA or the midterm exam, and we're headed towards the end of the whole semester. So what is left is not as big as what we have left behind. We're doing poetry, and obviously poetry is a new genre. Not new to you, of course, perhaps you have done poetry in previous semesters and in previous courses. I'm saying it is new here and for this course. What are the other genres that we have tackled so far? We have done drama or plays, and we have also done novellas and narratives. The narrative that we had was a short narrative or perhaps medium size. We took Candide, which was a novella by Voltaire. And we also, you know, passed through a number of time periods. So we had the 16th and the 17th century when we did Shakespeare and Webster, John Webster, and we also did the 18th century when we took Candide by Voltaire. These are different time periods, and of course, they are reflected in the works that we have done together, whether we're talking about drama or novellas and narrative. So this time around, we're doing poetry, which is, like I said, is a new genre. And the time period that we're addressing or exploring is late 18th century and early 19th century. And when we talk about late 18th century and early 19th century, we talk about the Romantic movement. Okay, so there was this literary movement. And there is obviously more to the Romantics than just literary, or that and then just the literary, because there were also you know romantics in the arts. There was also or were also romantics in philosophy, in politics. So romanticism was all over the place in the different genres and the different fields. But perhaps our focus would be more on whatever is literary, because we're English major and this is English literature. But it's only natural that we're going to be talking about the Romantics as poets, as literary figures, and more specifically as poets. Again, if we talk about late 18th century and early 19th century, we talk about Romanticism and Romantics. And before I proceed, I would like to also make uh, it clear that when we say romantics and when you say romantic, when you use the adjective romantic, or even when we use it as a noun, we don't mean this idea of having people, I mean, having some kind of romance where they fall in love with each other and they get married and perhaps live happily ever after. No, we don't mean this uh, everyday sense of the word romantic. What we mean here is romantic in the literary sense, with the associations of wildness, untapped potential, um, untainted nature, um, free spirits, revolution and rebellion, challenging established norms, whether we're talking about poetic forms or even the themes and the ideas that the Romantics explore and talk about. So this is what we mean by the Romantics here and Romanticism. So it's the romantics that we're doing, and it's romanticism that we're doing. Like I said, it's a literary movement, and again, we're limiting the scope to romanticism in literature, and more specifically in poetry. Again, typical of all types of romanticism, we have this idea of, you know, writers not very happy with the existing literary guidelines, where there is a great deal of rigidity. You have to adhere to the literary rules of engagement, if you like. You have to write in a certain way, you have to stick to certain rhymes, you have to keep to a certain meter and rhythm, and to you also have to kind of explore certain themes and ideas and not to explore others. So obviously, the romantics are totally against this idea of restrictions and fetters. So they want to write poetry that is free of all of that. Poetry that is, challenging, poetry that is, challenging the status quo, poetry that is free of the rigidity of traditional patterns, poetic patterns. Again, like I said, rhymes and using certain poetic diction, focusing on whatever is outside, nothing to do with the emotions and feelings of the poet, no self-expression. No, they were against that. They were against the idea that the poet should hold a mirror to nature. The ultimate goal for a poet before the Romantics was to kind of copy reality and copy nature and the world in a very faithful way. So if you're faithful in your copying and that you're mirroring, you're doing a good job. So with the Romantics, no, they say that there is more to life and reality than just mirroring what happens. We're hoping for more, we're aiming for more. And what is this more that they are hoping for? They are exploring human nature. They are trying to also bring to light aspects of life that can have such a good influence of human beings. They, for example, um, explore outside nature. They go to the countryside and they celebrate the beauty of the countryside and its simplicity and innocence. And they believe that the countryside and nature can be a teacher. We stand to learn a great deal from nature because it's pure and unmolested by the corrupting hands of human beings. So the Romantics, in a nutshell, is about challenging existing forms of expression, challenging, existing traditions and ideas, and charting new ways when it comes to self-expression, when it comes to glorifying nature, when it comes to thriving in in and on the imagination, um, and also in having visions about human beings and also about poets and visions that would deem the poet or consider the poet a prophet in the sense that prophets change things, prophets reform. So this is what they were after. So it's the romantics that we're doing, and obviously, when I say the romantics in literature, I would mean poetry. I would also mean novels, um, and the other genres. And but obviously, and like I said, we're going to limit our scope, and we're going to focus primarily on poetry. So it's romantic poetry that we're doing. But before we talk about just that, I would like us to first of all agree on what poetry means and how different poetry is from the other genres. So let me ask you this question, because none of us was born yesterday. We've done poetry before. I did poetry before as a teacher and also as a student, and you also did poetry in previous semesters. Remember your A230A, which means that you have done A100A, where there is a whole section devoted to poetry. And even prior, when you did your literary appreciation course, there was, I think, a section on poems and poetry. So I would like you to come to the mic and share what you know about poetry. When I say the word poetry, what what associations is triggered? What kind of what does the word invoke when I say poetry? What comes to your mind? Please, yeah, Hala, drop your hand, please. Okay, so it's poetry that we're doing. So come to the mic and share with us. What does poetry mean to you?
It means a special kind of a speech made with an art way, express feelings, emotions,
Mm.
sometimes describe the nature,
Well, all okay. Yeah, it's
significance,
a form,
poetry.
like you're saying, it's a form of speech. It's a speech. It's a type of speech which is obviously different from other types of speech. I agree with you on with this or on this, but whatever you said afterwards would apply to the other genres. I mean, you're talking about expressing feelings and emotions. This is something that you can find also in novels and in other genres. So obviously poetry is what distinguishes poetry from non-poetry wouldn't be the themes and the ideas and the subject matter. No, it's something else. Thank you, Seema. Let's move to Tagreed. Yeah.
Yes,
So
doctor, I believe it's a literary work. It has a special rhyme and a special style to be written with.
yeah, I agree. Poetry is it's not that it has special rhyme, because if you talk about poetry, poetry is obviously the only genre that has rhyme. Okay, so again, the style is also different and is unique and distinct. Yeah, that's true. Thank you, Tagreed. So one takeaway from what Tagreed is saying is the idea of rhyme. And when we talk about rhyme, we talk about music. Okay, so one distinguishing way of poetry and non-poetry would be the idea that poetry is rhymed. Okay, so what do we mean by rhyme? And where do we have rhyme in a poem? Any idea?
It is usually in the last words in each
Okay,
verse.
Okay, so it's the last or the final sound in the last word. You normally have two words rhyming together. Okay, they have identical sounds at the end of the lines. They can be, following each other. The lines are following each other, or they can be alternating. You have a line and then a different sound, and then the third would rhyme with the first. So rhyming and rhymes are very important, and they are at the end of the lines. Again, when I talk about rhyme, I talk about music because the words would rhyme together, would uh, um, you know, they would sound together and give you this feeling of music together with other things. Okay, this is rhyming, and again, we say that rhyming is one of the things that distinguish poetry from non-poetry, because we don't have rhymes in novels and in novellas and short stories, right? So what else about poetry? When I say poetry, obviously there is more to poetry than just rhyming and rhymes. Are you raising your hand, ya Tagreed?
Yes, doctor.
Yeah, go
Uh,
ahead.
I, I believe it's has a certain pattern also, like special syllables and vice versa to create a
Yeah,
lines.
yeah. This is what we call meter or rhythm. So the music that you feel in poetry also comes from this horizontal arrangement of a line where you have words that are stressed and unstressed. So it's through this arrangement of stressed and unstressed syllables that you also feel and hear the music of a poem. So musicality does not only lie in rhymes, but it is detected and felt and heard in horizontally in meters and rhythms within the lines. So this is another distinguishing feature. Let's talk graphically. Graphically, I mean when you see, if I give you examples of different genres, can you recognize a poem from afar when you see it without reading the content? When you see a poem from afar, can you say this is a poem, not a piece of prose, not part of a novel? Is it, can we recognize a poem in this way? Because it's,
Yes,
yeah, yeah. How or
has
why?
small. It has small sentences, and
Yeah,
there is a special type of spaces between each
yeah,
sentence.
yeah. That's a very good answer. What Seema is saying is excellent. Yeah, you can recognize a poem from afar by looking at it without reading it. You don't read the poem in order to recognize it as a poem. You look at it, and you can almost tell that this is a poem because of um, the shortness of the lines. The lines are not long, and they don't move from one margin to the other margin like we see in novels and in short stories and even in journalism. So we don't have this margin to margin kind of arrangement in poetry. So the lines are shorter, and they are also not consistent. Lines not consistent means that one line can be long and the other can be short, and another long and another short. So this is also something that can distinguish poetry from non-poetry. The fact that lines are not all of the same length. Lines are short and they are normally in the middle of the page, not they can start at a margin, but they don't make it to the other margin, like in paragraphs, in novels, and in short stories. So these are all very distinguishing features. What else? When we talk about poetry, of course, you know that in poetry we have images. Images means that you would feel that in a poem you are that the poem is more of a painting. Can be a painting, but we're not using colors and brushes. What we're using is words. So poetry is verbal painting, where the poet engages our different senses, our sense of sight and vision by perhaps drawing, by talking about mountains and lakes, by talking about things that would engage this sense of vision or sight. I mean, they can engage our sense of hearing, our sense by having birds, for example, singing, by having other animals, by having people speak, and they can engage the other senses, of course. So this is very important in poetry, the imagery that the poet deploys and uses in poems. Okay, and of course, um, it wouldn't be enough to talk about poetry without talking about the meaning. So poetry is also about meaning. So meaning is very important in focusing on the formal aspects, whether we're talking about rhyme, rhythm, imagery, where the poem is on the line, that wouldn't be enough. You need to connect all of this and see how they contribute towards achieving certain effects. The writer or the poet has an aim. He wants to establish or to kind of communicate certain effects and certain meanings. And he has at his disposal all what we said: meter, rhyme, rhythm, um, imagery, in order to arrive at those effects that he intends. Um, so to read a poem, you need to start your point of, departure. Your point of departure would be, of course, those formal aspects, but you don't stop there. You need to also move to the meaning and check what is it the writer, that the poet is trying to communicate to us. Um, Poetry is also, um, this is perhaps um, something that I experience myself. Poetry is very intellectual, which is very strange because you normally associate poetry with emotions and feelings. So to say that it is intellectual would be a little bit strange. But actually, this is what poetry is. Intellectual in the sense that you need to use your power of reason to kind of um, um, reorder things in a poem, to reorganize things so that they can make sense to you. The talent of a poem or a poet has to do with him manipulating the words and the arrangement, the normal arrangement of words is not normally observed. So in order for you to appreciate a poem and to assess it, you need to kind of give the order that you're familiar with, and that would take some thinking. So that's why we're saying that poetry is highly intellectual, and it is also philosophical in the sense that there is a philosophy behind what is being said. Nothing is random, I promise you. Let me perhaps ask you about um, poetry and whether we have people who write poetry in class. Now, of course, the language is irrelevant. It can be Arabic, it can be English, it can be any of the languages that you speak. So, do we have poets in class? Do we have poetic talents? Do you sometimes catch yourself writing poetry? Raise your hand if you write poetry, or what looks like poetry according to you. None of us writes poetry. Are you sure? It doesn't have to be English. You can write poetry in Arabic because poetry is universal. There is poetry in English, there is poetry in Arabic, right? Okay, so okay, you don't have to be a poet to appreciate poetry. So do you appreciate poetry? Appreciate means that you like to hear poetry, you like to read poetry. Are you of this type? Do you appreciate poetry? Do you like poetry?
Yes, I like it so much because recently I started to discover how much it can affect on the feeling.
Mm, yeah, yeah. It transports people to takes them to um, perhaps heights and levels that they wouldn't have imagined exist. So yes, okay. Who else appreciates poetry? Who catches himself or herself reading poetry or hearing and listening to poetry recited?
Me,
Yeah, Dalal.
I like
Yours. Yeah, go
listening
ahead.
to poetry,
Yes. Arabic poetry or English poetry or what?
mostly English poetry, as
Nice.
it seems very enjoyable to hear.
Nice. Okay. Do you still remember the latest poem or the poem that you read recently?
Mm.
You
The
remember
last,
or you want? Yeah, go
I
ahead.
don't remember.
That's fine. Okay. So what kind of poetry do you guys like? Because poetry can come in different forms and shapes. You can have heroic poetry talking about wars and heroism, gallants and courageous individuals. It can be lyrical poetry focusing on the feelings and emotions of the poet or even the readers. It can be sad poetry. It can be philosophical poetry where you're reflecting on life and existence and whatever uh, uh, is in between. It can be elegies where you like to read about, sometimes poets write about people who died and they highlight their good qualities and their achievements. So poetry, like I said, comes in different forms and shapes. You can also have love poetry, right? Um, okay, that's very interesting. Remember how we started? We said that you from afar you can almost tell that a poem is a poem, right? Let me perhaps give you examples, and I would like you to tell me whether the examples that I'm going to give you are poetry or perhaps other genres. So what do you think? Is this a poem? You think this is poetry? Hmm. From afar, I don't want you to read yet. Don't read. Just tell me from the layout. Is this a poem? Hmm. Yes or no? Anyone and everyone. Is this a poem? I'm asking
I
everyone. What?
I can't say it.
You can't see?
But
You mean I'm not sharing? Yeah, wait. Okay. Now I think everyone can see. Okay, my question is this a poem?
yes,
Is it a poem? Zayan.
No.
No, it's not a poem.
No, doctor, I don't
No,
think so.
that's not a poem. This is perhaps a paragraph, right?
Definitions.
Okay. So this is a definition, and the definitions do not come, or we don't use poetry for them. How about this one? Is this a poem?
No.
No, it's not a poem. How about this one? Is this a poem?
Yes, this one is a poem.
Yeah,
Yes,
this one is a
it is a
poem, right? Okay. So you see this lack of consistency in terms of the length of the lines, where the lines are. Some of them are in the middle, and some of them start at a margin, right? Okay. So this is a poem. How about this one? Is this a poem?
Yes, I think so. It's
Yeah,
also a
it
poem.
is. It is a poem. Remember, it's not. You don't have this margin to margin exercise that we see in paragraphs and in prose, right? And the lines are not consistent in terms of how long they are. Some of them are long and some of them are short. How about this one? Is this a poem?
Yes.
It is a poem. Yes. How about this one? Is this a poem?
I think it's a poem.
It is a poem. Again, lack of consistency when it comes to the length of lines. It is in the middle and lots of other things. Obviously, when we talk about poems, we don't only recognize poems from the only the formal aspects. There is also talk about the meaning and how the meaning is conveyed. And how is the meaning conveyed? It is, of course, conveyed through words. We call the words that people use in poetry, we call it diction. So words are vocabulary and diction that uh, poets use. They have special words. So the language of poetry is obviously different from the language of non-poetry. Of course, the romantics will come and say, no, the language of poetry should be the language of every day. But otherwise, all the other poets use special diction, special words. Um, let's go back. So when we talk about poetry, we talk about diction, which means words and vocabulary. We talk about sounds, and remember when we spoke about rhymes and rhythms, spoke about imagery and remember those words and phrases that engage our different senses, and of course, figurative language. You know, can be pictorial. It is meant also to kind of embellish poems. So again, and also the choice of the speaker in a poem, whether it is the poet himself or the persona of the poem. Again, these are, you know, features and aspects of a poem. Uh, um, and when I talk about sound, especially, I talk, of course, about rhyme and rhythm, and I talk about certain devices that people use, like alliteration. And when I talk about alliteration, I talk about the beginning of a number of a sequence of words or a string of words within the same lines, and they start with the same sound. Like you see here, whither will thou wander, wayfarer? So it's way, 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 another way, another way. So they uh, rhyme together, but the rhyme here is not at the end, it is at the beginning. And then you have devices like assonance, where the similarity is with the vowels and not the consonant, which means that they are normally in the middle. And then you have a device like onomatopoeia, and onomatopoeia is a device that the poets use, and it is simply, or it simply happens when you have a word whose sound can give you its meaning. And of course, we spoke about rhyme and rhythm. When we talk about figurative language, we talk about metaphors and similes and personifications, and with that, we have this idea of comparison. Your uh, people are comparing humans to non-humans, non-humans to humans, and of course, those comparisons are meant to you know, give us give depth and give meaning and everything. So metaphors are comparisons. Similes are like metaphors, but they have we normally use words like and as with them. And personifications is when you give human attributes and human qualities to non-human things. When I say, for example, that this city now does like a garment wear, so I'm personifying city and I'm making it a human being who is wearing a dress or a garment. Um, Again, you put all those devices together and you try to arrive at the meaning that the writer is trying to communicate to us. And like I said, these are all examples of poems. Let's move on. Again, when I started with the Romantics, and by now we know who the Romantics are and what kind of poetry they write. Again, um, a key to understanding or key to understanding Romanticism would be that they revolutionized poetry, that they wanted to write poetry that is different, that touch deep the human soul, poetry that is not like other poetry. I mean, Augustan age poetry, where those ideas of harmony and decorum and rigidity were part of the equation. No, they say that life is not as harmonious and as balanced as they are trying to tell us it is. So why don't we reflect reality as it is, uh, and give, uh, you know, what really happens? So they have, the Romantics are known for rejection of the principles of order, calm, harmony, balance, and rationality. Remember, they were writing against the backdrop of the 18th century. And of course, you remember that the 18th century was called the Age of Enlightenment. And at the core of this enlightenment was the idea of reason, that you need to rationalize everything, you need to think of everything in terms of reason. And there was no room for feelings and emotions. And this is something that the Romantics found very dry, very uh, unhuman, if you like. That's why with them, the focus is always on the individual, the subjective, the irrational, the imaginative, the personal, the spontaneous, the emotional, the visionary, and the transcendental. Remember what we said about some of their features and elements. Of course, I'm talking about the Romantics. Whenever we talk about the Romantics and their experiences, there is this focus on nature. And of course, by nature, we mean the nature of the countryside, far from the madding crowd, away from the city and its dwellers, and away from the hustle and bustle of city life. According to the Romantics, nature is edifying. Nature is a teacher that we stand to learn a great deal from. So the focus with them is on nature, which means the jungle and the forest and even the desert, because these places are untouched by human beings, that they were not molested by human beings. According to the Romantics, human beings are corrupted by nature, and whatever they lay their hand on, they corrupt and they destroy. So they are against the garden if you compare the garden to the jungle, because the garden is trimmed. You have this human interference, which is bad according to them, while the jungle is their favorite place because it's not trimmed, it's not molested by human beings. Again, they have this preference of the emotions and emotion over reason. They also favor the senses over the intellect. They have this focus on the self and on human personalities and moods and mental potentialities. Again, for them, the poet and the personas of poems are heroes, are exceptional figures. They have passions and they have inner struggles, and romantic poetry shows all of that. According to the Romantics, the poet is also a genius, supremely talented, and has this creative spirit that is unrivaled by other, human beings. So they focus on this creativity. They believe that the creative spirit is more important than the strict adherence to formal rules and traditional procedures. Again, the imagination is all in all with them. It is their gateway to transcendental experience and spiritual truth. They would go all the way back to neglected cultures and neglected areas of nation's folklore, whether this is national, ethnic. They love very much to go all the way back to medieval periods with its castles and very strange things. Again, they have this passion for whatever is exotic, whatever is remote, mysterious, weird, occult, even monstrous, and even satanic. Spoke about how they started. We said that the Romantics started in late 18th century and early 19th century with the publication of their manifesto, the Romantic Manifesto or statement of perhaps initiation and being was the lyrical ballads. I mean, they published the lyrical ballads in the 1790s by William Wordsworth and Samuel Taylor Coleridge published this piece of work, and in it they started to talk about what poetry is for them and what their vision is. William Wordsworth and Samuel Taylor Coleridge belong to what we call the first generation romantic poets. Before them, there was William Blake, who is also romantic, but we normally call him a pre-romantic poet. According to William Wordsworth and Samuel Taylor Coleridge, poetry is the spontaneous overflow of powerful feelings. So this is their rallying cry, if you like. This is what they believe poetry is and should be. Over time, we will have a second generation romantic poets. We're talking roughly between 1805 and the 1830s. And we have very famous pioneers, romantic figures here, like people like John Keats, Lord Byron, Shelley, and others. Okay, so we'll focus more on William Wordsworth. William Wordsworth is a very famous romantic poet. He is one of those romantic pioneers. We'll focus more on uh, his poetry and different stages of his life and development as a poet. Let's do that after we take a 5 minute break. We'll take a 5 minute break, and when we come back, we will catch up with Wordsworth. Okay, everyone? I'll see you in 5 minutes. I'm back. Can you hear me? No.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so we're still talking about the romantics, and now you know who the romantics are and what they stand for, right? Um, Again, when we talk about the romantics, we talk about this lack of rigidity. I mean, taking it easy when it comes to writing poetry, exploring new territories and new terrains, engaging with whatever is weird and strange, occult, whatever is out of the ordinary. Um, and this is, of course, very interesting. So people uh, wouldn't subscribe to the mundane in terms of, every day things. We're so used to things that familiarity blinds us. I mean, and we don't see whatever is behind the surface. So it's the romantics that they are trying to delve deep into the human soul, the inner recesses of the human soul, if you like. Okay, so now the focus would be today and next time on Wordsworth. And like I said, Wordsworth is a pioneering figure when it comes to the romantics. He's a first generation romantic poet, and he is the poet of nature. For him, nature is all in all. And of course, by nature, by now, we mean nature with capital N. It's the nature that we find in the countryside. And again, why the countryside? Because this is where mountains and lakes and birds and trees are, far from the madding crowd. You don't have the hustle and bustle of city life. You don't have the calculations of city dwellers. You don't have corruption. I mean, life is pure and simple over there. Even us, even this is what we do now. If you're kind of bored and sick of life, what do you do? If you have a dira, you go to the dira. Don't you hear that from time to time? People say that we'll go to the dira, right? Where the dira is normally a faraway place where you have perhaps villages. People there are very simple, very cheerful. They don't have the sophistication of city dwellers. Who goes to the Dira every week or every 2 weeks? Every once in a while. Do you have a Dira? I'm asking everyone. A Dira in Arabic, of course. Okay. Perhaps I'm the only one who used to go to the Dira back there when I was in Egypt. So why would people go to the Dira? Again, I'm telling you, you want to have fresh air. You want to stay away from the noise of the city. You want to perhaps go and stay by a lake and you see water, fresh water running. There are rivers over there, if there are mountains. So the air is different, very fresh, unpolluted, right? So this is what the Romantics, or more specifically, what Wordsworth used to thrive in. This is his life, or this is perhaps um, what he chose for, perhaps the second part of his life. He was a city dweller like the rest of us, but at one point he would decide that I need to leave everything behind and go to real nature, go to the city, to the countryside, and live with people over there. According to him, people there, because they live by nature, they live by nature, and nature, they are innocent and pure, because according to him, land and nature are innocent and pure. So they have such a beautiful, I mean, nature has such a beautiful effect on people who live there. So of all the people, he thinks that the people of the countryside, the farmers, are the most innocent and the most pure and the purest. So again, Wordsworth is a poet of nature. He celebrates nature like no other poet does. And this is what we're going to see, and this is how it will show in his poetry, as we're going to see. So let me ask you: Have you at any point in your career and your life done anything by Wordsworth? When I say Wordsworth, does the name ring any bells? You know who Wordsworth is? I mean, of course, aside from what I said about him, that he's a romantic poet and stuff. Did you read any of his poetry? It's fine if you didn't. That's fine. Okay. Okay. Let's move on. Okay. So the chapter that we're doing on the romantics is chapter 1, and we have Wordsworth featured in very prominently in the chapter. Actually, the chapter is all about Wordsworth. So William Wordsworth, and this is obviously the title of the chapter, and it has this poet in a landscape. So William Wordsworth, Poet in a Landscape, is the full title of the chapter. I'm perhaps more interested in the second part of the title, which is poet. We know what a poet is and what the associations of a poet are, and in a landscape. And of course, landscape here means nature. So we're talking about a poet who celebrates and glorifies nature. And what does nature mean to him? It means the countryside, where life is simple and pure, unmolested by the corrupt hands of the human beings, far from the madding crowd, like Thomas Hardy always says. Okay, so those the place where he used to live is called the Dove Cottage, and it is now and it's in a place called Lake District, and of course it is in the English countryside, and now it has been turned into a museum, and people from all over the world go there, and they try to relive the experiences of Wordsworth while writing poetry. We have this school of poetic appreciation. With this school, I mean, they say, I mean, according to those people, if you would like to appreciate the poetry of a poet more, you need to go where he used to live, see how he used to live, perhaps relive those experiences that he had, go to the places that he used to frequent, perhaps see the pen that he used to use and stuff like that. But this is a school that we have. Um, that's why we have people going to Lake District, and to more specifically to Dove Cottage, in order to see Wordsworth in action in the past, of course. And these are scenes and pictures taken from the area where Wordsworth used to live. And as you can see, these are very beautiful places. And as you can see, they are uh, natural settings. You don't have any of the features of the city in them, where life is very pure, as you can see, is very clean, and very inspirational as well. We spoke about poetry and how to read a poem, and I'm not going to repeat myself. Spoke about the formal aspects of a poem. And now we go to this. And I'm not going to say whether this is a poem or not. I would like you, I'll give you 4 minutes to do two things for me. First of all, I would like you to read, to skim through the different parts and then establish whether this is a poem or not. You need to tell me from what you see this is a poem or not, and then move on to the second question, which is whether it is a romantic poem or not. Again, by now you know what the features of romantic poetry are. So two things that you're going to do. First of all, to tell me what genre is this? Is this a poem or perhaps something else? The second question that you need to find answer to would be whether this is, if you establish the fact that it is a poem, so what kind of poem it is? Is it romantic or otherwise? Yalla, I'll give you 3 minutes. Go ahead. Okay. Any luck? Okay. Remember the first question? Come to the mic and tell me. What was the first question? Yalla, Rawan. Remember the first question?
Yes, you asked us if it's a poem or not.
What do you
I
think?
think it's a poem
It's a poem. Okay.
Yeah.
Why? Why do you think it's a poem, yeah, Rawan?
because it's written in a special way. It isn't like normal text.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, very good. Okay. What was the second question, ya Rawan?
What kind of like poem it
Yeah,
is?
yeah,
He expresses his emotions and stuff, so it gives me kind of like romantic vibes.
yeah, yeah.
So I think
That's
it's a
true.
romance poem.
Yeah, not romance. We call it romantic, right?
Yes, maybe
Okay.
romantic.
So it's if it's about feelings and emotions, it can be romantic. Okay, thank you. What else? What makes, thank you, Rawan. What else makes it romantic, ya Jamaa? Everybody else or anyone else? Hmm. Remember what we said about the Romantics? Remember what we said about Wordsworth? That he is a poet of nature. Do we see any aspects of nature displayed or expressed in the poem?
Yes.
Okay. Can you elaborate on that, ya Talal? Would you like to
But
talk more about it?
yes,
Yes.
Patrick, it's about the stars and clouds,
Okay.
and as well as mentioned about golden daffodils
Yeah.
and trees.
So these are all elements of nature, aspects of nature, right? So these are
Yes,
things that you don't see in the city. You only see in nature, in outside nature, in the countryside, right? Remember what we said about the countryside and nature? If you have the countryside and nature featured, it means that that we have a romantic poem, and it is a romantic poem. Okay. What I want you to do now, again, I would like you, now that we have established that this is a poem, and now that we have established that this is a romantic poem, I would like you to read it one more time. And this time around, I would like you to detect the romantic elements in it. I would like you to give me vivid examples. So not mere impressions or overall impressions. Or you may want to even take down notes. I mean, you tell me in stanza one, we have this and that word that tells us that this is romantic. This and that word, this and that, and so on. I'll give you perhaps 3 more minutes to read the poem one more time and to take down notes. Again, we're trying to establish how romantic the the poem is. Yalla, go ahead. 3 minutes, everyone. Okay. Um, in order, and this is perhaps for future reference, not now, because I know that you have already read. In order to appreciate a poem more and to feel it more, you need to read it out loud. So poetry is normally meant to be heard and to be read out loud rather than written. So um, perhaps next time one of your readings should be an out loud kind of reading. So in order to feel the music and to hear it in your ears. Okay, so it's a romantic poem that we'll have. This is what we have established, and we're trying to provide evidence. If I say that this is a romantic poem, I need to prove it, and I would like you to prove it from the different stanzas that we have. You know what a stanza is? If you have a collection of lines and they are put together, we call them a stanza. So a stanza is the equivalent of a paragraph in a narrative in a novel or a novella or a short story. So how many stanzas can you see? I'm asking you. How many stanzas do we have in this poem?
5.
Five? I can only see four. Why? Can you see five? I can see, and
Yes.
I can. Is معقولة?
There are 4.
There are four. Perhaps you have a different version, and this is possible because those poems were subjected to a lot of revision by Wordsworth himself. Later in his life, he started to kind of edit his work, and we'll know why he is editing his work and whether this is good or bad. But as it stands now, I can only see four. Okay, so again, we're saying that it is a romantic poem. Let's hear what you have to say from the notes that you have taken. So who would like to come to the mic and share this with us? Hmm. Are we agreed on the fact that this is a romantic poem and that this is a poem in and of and about nature, right? What more would you like to bring to the conversation? Nothing? Are you tired or something? You didn't find any romantic or any, aspects of nature in the poem? Aula? Yeah, Rawan, go ahead.
What pointed out for me that it's a romantic poem. In the fourth stanza, there's a line where it says, "And then my heart
Mm.
with pleasure fills and dances with the daffodils." This
Mhm.
line, he reflects how he feels about nature in a way that makes him happy, and that like it made it seem like it's a romantic poem for me.
Yeah, we're done with this idea that it is a romantic poem. And the reason why it is a romantic poem because is that we have this heavy talk and this heavy dwelling on the idea of nature. So let's talk about the elements of nature that we have in the poem. Elements of nature are when you talk about clouds, valleys, hills, trees, right? What else do we have? Waves.
Stars, twinkles.
Yeah. So these are all,
Breeze.
yes, these are all elements of nature, right? And these are things that you only see in nature, in outside nature. What's the effect of that? Is he happy, sad? What? What do you think?
Feeling lonely.
Well, lonely here is what you think it is. Lonely here means on his own. It's being in a state of solitude. Solitude means that you are on your own, and that doesn't mean that you're sad or you feel alone. No, it's not this sense. Here, the word lonely means on his own. Nobody is with him. So I wandered lonely as a cloud. I wandered alone on my own. Okay, so there is nothing sad about it. He is highlighting the fact that he is on his own in nature, like a cloud. Okay, so again, I'm asking about the effect of all of that on him, or the persona of the poem. Is the persona of the poem happy or sad?
Happy.
Absolutely happy. Who wouldn't be happy in the company of all those lovely things? Waves, valleys, and hills, daffodils, right? Okay. Um, so what's happening? So I wandered lonely as a cloud. Even the title is very telling. Um, um, mm, I mean, let's say it's the first line because I don't know whether this is the title or perhaps this is how people know the poem. So the first line is I wandered lonely as a cloud. So it's I. This is obviously the poet himself wandered. So what is to wander? And obviously, wander here with A means moving around. You move around and you move aimlessly. Okay? You don't have to have a gharad or a purpose. Sometimes having a purpose for everything, destroys this everything or spoils it. So I wandered lonely on my own, as if I was a cloud. But let's stop at this idea of loneliness because this is also a feature of the romantics. They uh, like it when they are on their own, when they are alone. Okay, it has nothing to do with loneliness and being sad and everything. No, he is on his own, and this is his choice. So they find one of their characteristics is that they find comfort and solace in being alone, in solitude, in having their own, and being in their own shell, if you like. So I wandered lonely as a cloud. And obviously, what he didn't say is I wandered lonely, free, free as a cloud. You know, clouds are free. I mean, they are um, high in the sky, and obviously they move freely. And of course, nothing is more important than being free in a world that looks like a prison, and an open air prison, if you like. So I wandered lonely as a cloud. And then he was obviously wandering lonely as a cloud. And again, it's in nature. And he starts to move around between hills and valleys. And I mean, he is enjoying the moment when he saw or caught a glimpse of a crowd of daffodils beside the lake, beneath the trees. These are all, uh, um, you know, um, images or verbal images that you can put together and come up with a very beautiful verbal painting, fluttering and dancing in the breeze. And then he goes on and he talks about other elements of nature until he obviously he is happy and all the other elements are happy too. And until he comes to the last stanza where he is going to tell us about what happened when he goes home, having all those sweet sensations and nice experiences. He's going to be on his own back home, and he's going to lie on the couch, and he's going to start to think and contemplate and think of what he has seen. And this is going to be, kind of material enough for him to write poetry. So poetry happens this way, according to him. When you go out in outside nature, you uh, fill yourself with those nice breezes, those fresh, with fresh air. You see pure elements of nature, and then you go home and you lie down and you start to think and wonder, and then poetry comes out. You're filled with pleasure, and poetry comes out. So it only happens if you are also alone. This is what he stresses. You go on your own in outside nature, and you also go back home and you lie down on your own so that you can remember what happened and you turn that all into poetry. Let's talk about the diction. And by diction, of course, I mean the vocabulary or the words that the poet used. Do you think he is using difficult vocab items, the difficult
No, no.
diction? No. And this is, of course, typical of the Romantics. Remember, one of the things that they were not happy about was using poetic diction, using special kind of words for poetry that is exclusive to poetry. They said no, poetry should be accessible to everyone. That's why we're going to use words that everyone can understand. What do you think of the length of the lines? Obviously, they are not very long, right?
Yes.
Um, yeah, and there is traces of rhyme, right? But obviously, it's not a pattern. It happens when it happens with them. So you have glee, and you have they, glee, and you have thought and prot. You have lie and I. Um, yeah, you have way and bay. Okay. So this is a poem. Again, it's a romantic poem where obviously the poet is celebrating nature and the beauties of nature. Then we have the I, um, which can be the poet himself. The diction or the words are very simple and direct. The meter is iambic tetrameter, and we have this rhyme scheme. Again, it's a lyrical poem where the poet is expressing a single mood or moment of consciousness, usually personal, where you have the poet as the speaker. So it's very simple. If you're going to analyze it, you have three stages, and those three stages correspond to the three or the four stages that the four stanzas. The first one is described in he describes the experience, and then his reaction to the experience, and then how the experience continues with him and it works within his memory and consciousness. So the poem describes how experiences of natural beauty can enter, work within, and are beneficent to individual minds. Again, the focus here is on the poem itself, regardless of the context, what happened before or after the poem, and where he came from, where he was planning to do. So you kind of read the poem of its context so that it can make sense, and then the context can come after that. Again, this is reading the poem without knowing about the biography of the author, and this is an approach. And the other approach would be that you read the poem with the biography of the poet in mind. If we turn it upside down and read it according to the biography, we're going to discover a number of things about the poem. One thing would be that actually Wordsworth was not alone. Remember, he said that I wandered lonely as a cloud, or I wandered. Actually, from his biography, we discovered that he was not lonely or alone. He had the company of Dorothy, his sister. And how could we know about that? Because she wrote about the same experience in her diary, so or journal. So according to Dorothy Wordsworth journal, he was not alone. Um, we of course we get to know that the poem was written between March 1804 and April 1807 at Love Cottage. And here we're going to start to make those comparisons between the poem and the diary or the journal. The poem, of course, is by Wordsworth, and the diary is by his sister. You need to always remember that, again, he is saying that he was alone, but what the entry in the diary says something else. It says that Dorothy was with him. Um, you would also like to think of Wordsworth as a public figure, and of course, and as a poet, and poetry is meant to be published. So he had this intention of publishing the poem, while Dorothy, because she's using a journal, she doesn't want to publish it. Some journals and diaries are normally very private. You need to remember that he is a man, and obviously at the time, men were given opportunities, and while women were deprived of all of those opportunities. So that's a private thing for Dorothy. Um, Again, Dorothy is writing in prose while he is writing in poetry. Um, Again, of course, he's a romantic poet, and he writes in a very romantic way. Perhaps highlighting those romantic and natural elements in nature. While she, of course, as a prose writer, she doesn't uh, um, care about those things. Why all she is after is to register what happened and when it happened and why. Um, Again, typical of diaries, Dorothy's diary or journal is full of everyday detail, information, and observation, which is not evidently ranked by importance. If you compare this to the poem, you're going to find that the poem is lyrical, personal, I mean, and is meant to be published. Again, there is this focus on the idea of shared experience. Dorothy is making it clear that this is a shared experience, which means that she was there with Wordsworth, while Wordsworth is saying that I wondered lonely as a cloud, which means that he typical of poets feels that uh, in spite of the fact that he has people around, that he is on his own, and it's typical of poets to feel that they are disconnected, um, and they have their own world. Again, it's we use the journal or the diary to certify the poem. Yeah, we now know that the experience is actual. Again, in order to perhaps later in his life, in order to perhaps edit the poem and perhaps add or be reminded of what happened, Wordsworth would go to the diary of his sister and read from it. Again, with the poem, we have this dramatization of the figure of the poet. Again, there is this focus on the workings and solace of memory as a foundation of both, identity. So, as you can see, for Dorothy, this was a collaborative enterprise, but for Wordsworth, this was a solitary act, and it points to his genius as a poet. This is what he feels he is. Again, this is all about the context where Wordsworth was and what he was doing and what kind of feelings uh, um, he got. Later on in his life, he's going to subject his poems, and this happens to be one of them, to continual acts of revision and reorganization. That's why we have this difference. I would say that this is four stanzas, and somebody else would say no, these are three. So it's again because we have different versions of the same poem. Again, it's because Wordsworth started to revisit those poems and kind of trim them, change this, modify that. He is a self-editing poet. There is going to always be talk about the Wordsworthian in the poem, but perhaps this is something that we should keep for next time. I'll stop on this note and with this item, and when I see you again, we're going to continue with Wordsworth, and hopefully we can finish him next time. We have space for questions, if any. You guys have any questions? The MTA results will be out tomorrow or the day after, inshallah. Right, on this note and with this item, we'll come to the end of this lovely meeting. Thank you so much, and I'll see you next week. Salam alaikum.